Imagine being left with nothing but a mountain of debt, and no one to turn to. This is the story of a resilient grandma who fought back and built a new life from scratch. Stick around to witness an incredible journey of hope, determination, and triumph. Meet Margaret, a 62-year-old grandmother from a small town in Indiana. Life had always been simple for her, until her world turned upside down when her ex-husband walked out, leaving her with over $150,000 in debt. With no steady income, no savings, and a family depending on her, Margaret's life seemed like it was falling apart. But what happened next will leave you inspired. Margaret sat at her dining table, her hands trembling as she sifted through a pile of unopened envelopes. The kitchen light above her flickered faintly, casting shadows that seemed to mirror the uncertainty she felt inside. Each envelope contained another reminder of her mounting debts. Bills she hadn't known about, credit card statements she hadn't signed for, and loan notices that bore her name but carried amounts she could scarcely fathom. The life she had built with her husband of 35 years was crumbling, and the weight of it all pressed heavily on her chest. She wondered how things had gone so wrong. Was it her fault for trusting too much? Or was it his fault for hiding so many secrets? As tears welled up in her eyes, Margaret reflected on the life they once shared. They had met as young adults in their small Indiana town, bonded by dreams of a quiet, simple life. Together, they had raised 3 children and built what she thought was a stable home. She had believed in him, supported his ambitions, and taken pride in being a homemaker, while running her small crafting business on the side. Little did she know that the financial foundation of their life was built on lies. It all began to unravel one cold January morning when her husband, Robert, dropped a bombshell over breakfast. As he sipped his coffee, he looked at her with a mixture of guilt and determination. "Margaret," he said, his voice quivering slightly, "I need to tell you something. I've made some mistakes." At first, she thought it was something minor, maybe a forgotten bill or an oversight in their finances. But as he continued, the reality hit her like a freight train. Robert confessed to accumulating over $150,000 in debt through a combination of poor investments, failed business ventures, and gambling. Margaret felt her stomach drop. Her hands clutched her mug tightly as she tried to process his words. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "I thought I could fix it," he said. "I thought I could make it right before you found out." But the nightmare didn't end there. Just a week after his confession, Robert left. He didn't just leave their home. He left their marriage, their family, and all the responsibilities behind. Margaret woke up one morning to find a note on the kitchen counter. It was short and cold. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." The weight of his abandonment hit her harder than any financial burden ever could. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly alone. Her children, now grown and living in different states, were shocked and furious, but they could only offer emotional support. The practical reality of her situation was clear. Margaret was left to deal with the fallout on her own. The calls from creditors began almost immediately. At first, Margaret tried to explain the situation, hoping for some understanding or leniency. But the voices on the other end of the line were cold and unyielding. "Mrs. Johnson, the account is in your name. You are responsible for the balance," they would say, over and over again. Each call felt like a slap in the face, a harsh reminder of the mess she had been left to clean up. Margaret started avoiding her phone, letting it ring until it stopped. But the letters kept coming, piling up on her kitchen counter like a physical manifestation of her anxiety. Her crafting business, which had always been a source of joy and creativity, now seemed like a futile endeavor. The few $100s she earned each month barely made a dent in her bills. She thought about getting a job, but at 62 years old, with no formal education beyond high school, her options were limited. The local grocery store was hiring cashiers, but the idea of standing on her feet for 8 hours a day was daunting. Margaret felt trapped, like she was sinking in quicksand with no one to pull her out. In her darkest moments, Margaret thought about giving up. She thought about selling her house, declaring bankruptcy, and moving in with one of her children. But every time she considered it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "You're stronger than this." It was the same voice that had carried her through tough times before. The voice that had told her to keep going when her mother passed away, when her youngest child was diagnosed with a learning disability, and when Robert's temper had gotten the better of him in the early years of their marriage. That voice, though faint, reminded her that she had survived worse and could survive this too. One evening, as she sat alone in her living room, Margaret pulled out an old photo album. She flipped through the pages, smiling faintly at pictures of her children as babies, family vacations to the lake, and Christmas mornings filled with laughter. Tucked between the pages was a small note she had written to herself years ago, during a particularly challenging time in her life. It read, "Never underestimate your strength." The words hit her like a bolt of lightning. Margaret realized that she had been waiting for someone to save her, but the only person who could truly save her was herself. That night, she made a decision. She would not let Robert's mistakes ruin her life. She would fight back no matter how long it took or how hard it was. Margaret grabbed a notebook and started making a list of her assets, her skills, and her options. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act of putting pen to paper was the first step on her journey to reclaim her life. Margaret woke up the next morning with a newfound resolve. The air in the house felt different. Not lighter, but charged with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As she brewed her morning coffee, she reviewed the list she had made the night before. It was a messy, scribbled assortment of ideas, but it represented something she hadn't felt in a long time. Control. She decided her first step would be understanding the full scope of her financial situation. No more hiding from the phone calls or tossing unopened envelopes into the drawer. Today, she would face the reality head-on. She set up her laptop at the kitchen table, opened her notebook, and started dialing the numbers of her creditors. The first call was the hardest. Margaret could feel her palms sweating as she waited for someone to pick up. When the voice on the other end answered, she felt a lump in her throat. "Hello, my name is Margaret Johnson," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to discuss my account." The conversation was difficult. She had to explain her situation multiple times and deal with a representative who seemed more interested in reciting policy than offering solutions. But Margaret stayed firm. She asked questions, wrote down notes, and by the end of the call, she had a clearer picture of what she owed and to whom. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. For the first time in months, she felt like she was taking back control. The rest of the day was spent making more calls, organizing her bills, and creating a spreadsheet to track her debts. Margaret wasn't tech-savvy, but she figured out enough to create a simple table that listed each creditor, the amount owed, and the minimum payment. Seeing everything laid out in one place was both terrifying and motivating. The total amount was staggering, but Margaret reminded herself that this was just the starting point. "One step at a time," she whispered to herself as she closed her laptop for the evening. Over the next few days, Margaret threw herself into learning about personal finance. She visited the library and checked out books with titles like Debt-Free Living and The Beginner's Guide to Budgeting. She watched YouTube videos from financial experts who talked about everything from negotiating with creditors to building an emergency fund. At first, it all felt overwhelming. There were so many terms she didn't understand: interest rates, consolidation loans, snowball methods. But she took notes diligently, determined to learn. Every evening, she would sit at her kitchen table, her notebook open and her pen in hand, absorbing as much information as she could. One of the most valuable lessons Margaret learned was the importance of creating a budget. She realized that for years, she had let Robert handle most of the finances, trusting that he knew what he was doing. Now she was starting from scratch. She listed all her sources of income, which included her small crafting business and a modest Social Security check. Then she calculated her expenses: the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and now the minimum payments on her debts. The numbers didn't add up. Margaret knew she needed to find a way to increase her income. Her crafting business, which had always been more of a hobby than a serious enterprise, became her primary focus. Margaret made a list of all the items she could create: custom quilts, handmade jewelry, decorative wreaths, and researched how much people were willing to pay for them. She started an Etsy shop, naming it Margaret's Creations, and spent hours uploading photos of her work and writing detailed descriptions. She also reached out to local craft fairs and farmers markets, securing spots to sell her items in person. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Margaret also explored other ways to earn money. She signed up for a babysitting service, offering to watch children in her home during the day. She took on small sewing jobs for neighbors, hemming pants and repairing torn jackets. Every dollar she earned felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming her life. She kept a jar on the kitchen counter labeled Debt Fund, and every time she made a payment, she would drop a few coins into it as a visual reminder of her progress. Despite her determination, the journey was not without setbacks. There were days when Margaret felt like giving up. Days when the weight of her responsibilities seemed too much to bear. She struggled with self-doubt, wondering if she was too old or too inexperienced to turn her life around. But every time those thoughts crept in, she would look at her list and remind herself of her goals. She wanted to pay off her debts, keep her home, and prove to herself, and to her children, that she was capable of overcoming this challenge. Her children, meanwhile, were a constant source of encouragement. They called regularly to check on her progress, and offered advice whenever they could. Margaret's oldest daughter, Sarah, even helped her set up a GoFundMe page to share her story and raise money for her debts. Margaret was hesitant at first. She didn't want to air her struggles publicly, but Sarah convinced her that people would want to help. "Mom, you've always been there for others," Sarah said. "Now it's time to let others be there for you." The response was overwhelming. Friends, family members, and even strangers donated, leaving messages of support that brought Margaret to tears. One evening, as Margaret read through the comments on her GoFundMe page, she felt a renewed sense of hope. People believed in her. People who didn't even know her were rooting for her success. It was a humbling experience, but it also reminded her that she wasn't alone. Margaret realized that her story wasn't just about paying off debt. It was about resilience, determination, and the power of community. Slowly but surely, Margaret began to see progress. The balances on her debt started to shrink, and her confidence grew with each passing day. She knew there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, she felt like she was heading in the right direction. As she sat at her kitchen table one evening, her notebook in front of her, and her jar of coins by her side, Margaret smiled to herself. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to overcome them. Margaret's journey of rebuilding her life after being left in financial ruins wasn't just about numbers and spreadsheets. It was about learning who she truly was when faced with adversity. The first few weeks of her newfound determination had been consumed by the practicalities of organizing her finances and setting up small streams of income. However, as she started gaining momentum, Margaret realized that the real battle wasn't just external, it was internal. The quiet moments, the nights when the house was too silent, those were the times when doubt tried to creep back in. But Margaret had learned something valuable in the process of facing her fears. Resilience isn't about being fearless, it's about moving forward despite the fear. One morning, as the sunlight streamed through her kitchen window, Margaret felt a rare sense of calm. Her Etsy shop had made its first sale, a beautiful quilt she had poured hours of work into. The notification had come through her phone late the previous night, and she had to reread it 3 times to believe it. Her customer, a woman from Michigan, had left a heartfelt note saying how excited she was to gift the quilt to her daughter. Margaret couldn't help but smile, knowing that something she had created would bring joy to someone else's life. It was a small success, but to Margaret, it felt monumental. It was proof that her efforts were paying off. Encouraged by this success, Margaret threw herself even deeper into her crafting business. She invested in better materials, even though it meant tightening her already strained budget. She watched countless YouTube tutorials to improve her techniques and started experimenting with new designs. Each evening, her kitchen transformed into a workshop, with fabric scraps, spools of thread, and beads scattered across the table. Her hands often ached from the hours of work, but she didn't mind. Every stitch felt like a step toward freedom. Despite her progress, new challenges soon emerged. Margaret's mortgage company sent her a foreclosure notice, claiming she was months behind on payments. The sight of the letter, with its bold, intimidating language, sent her into a panic. For a moment, she felt like she was back at square one, drowning in the weight of her circumstances. But then she remembered the promise she had made to herself. No more running from problems. Taking a deep breath, she called the bank and explained her situation. The conversation was difficult. The representative on the other end was polite but firm, explaining the terms and timelines Margaret had to meet to avoid losing her home. Margaret took notes meticulously, asking for clarification whenever she didn't understand something. By the end of the call, she had a clearer picture of what she needed to do. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. Margaret knew she had to act fast, so she created a detailed plan, allocating every spare dollar toward catching up on her payments. Her children rallied around her during this time, offering both emotional and practical support. Sarah, her oldest daughter, visited one weekend to help her declutter the house. "Mom, you've held on to so much stuff," Sarah said, holding up an old, dusty lamp. "Let's sell what we can. Every little bit helps." At first, Margaret was hesitant. Many of the items held sentimental value, reminding her of happier times. But she realized that holding on to objects wouldn't bring her peace. Together, they sorted through decades of belongings, setting aside items to sell at a garage sale. The sale was a success, and though the amount they earned wasn't huge, it was enough to make a dent in her immediate expenses. The sense of community Margaret experienced during this time was another unexpected gift. Her neighbors, who had always been friendly but distant, began to show their support in small but meaningful ways. One neighbor offered to buy several handmade items from her Etsy shop, while another volunteered to help her with yard work, so she could focus on her business. Margaret felt deeply moved by their kindness. It reminded her that even in the toughest times, there are always people willing to lend a hand. Margaret also made it a point to educate herself further. She attended free financial literacy workshops at the local community center, where she met others who were facing similar struggles. Sharing stories and exchanging tips with people in the same boat gave her a sense of solidarity. She learned about debt consolidation options, government assistance programs, and strategies for negotiating with creditors. Each new piece of knowledge felt like a weapon in her arsenal, giving her the confidence to tackle her challenges head-on. As Margaret juggled her various responsibilities, she began to notice small but significant changes in herself. She was no longer the woman who avoided answering the phone or opening her mail. She had become someone who faced her problems with determination and grit. Even her children noticed the transformation. "Mom, you're amazing," her son Michael said one evening during a phone call. "I don't know how you do it." His words brought tears to Margaret's eyes, but they were tears of pride and gratitude. Of course, the road was still far from easy. There were nights when Margaret felt utterly exhausted, her body aching from the long hours she put into her work. There were moments of frustration when her Etsy shop didn't generate as many sales as she had hoped, or when unexpected expenses threw her budget into disarray. But each time she felt like giving up, she reminded herself of how far she had come. She kept a journal where she wrote down her daily achievements, no matter how small they seemed. "Sold 2 items today," she wrote one evening. "Caught up on the electric bill. Feeling proud." Margaret also leaned on her faith during difficult times. She began attending church regularly, finding comfort in the sermons and the supportive community. The pastor's words often resonated deeply with her, reminding her that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. Margaret started volunteering at the church, helping organize events and bake sales. It gave her a sense of purpose beyond her own struggles, reminding her of the importance of giving back. By the end of the 3rd month of her journey, Margaret began to see tangible progress. Her debts, while still significant, were no longer insurmountable. Her mortgage was no longer at risk of foreclosure, thanks to her relentless efforts to catch up on payments. Her Etsy shop was gaining traction, with more customers leaving glowing reviews and recommending her products to others. Margaret felt a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. She was proving to herself, and to the world, that she was capable of overcoming the challenges life had thrown her way. Margaret's journey, while inspiring, was anything but smooth. By the time she had crossed the initial hurdles of debt consolidation and income generation, life threw her another curveball. Her car, an old sedan that she had relied on for years, broke down unexpectedly. The mechanic's estimate was far beyond what Margaret could afford. At that moment, It felt like the universe was conspiring against her. She sat in the waiting room of the repair shop, staring blankly at the invoice, her mind racing through possible solutions. Should she take out another loan? Could she manage without a car? The weight of the decision bore down on her, but Margaret knew she couldn't afford to panic. Instead of rushing into a decision, Margaret reached out to her network of friends and family. She called her friend Linda, who had been a source of comfort and advice since her divorce. "Linda," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to do. I need my car, but I can't afford this repair." Linda, ever the practical problem solver, suggested looking into local programs that offered assistance for low-income individuals in emergency situations. "You'd be surprised how many resources are out there," Linda said. Taking her friend's advice, Margaret began researching. She discovered a local charity that provided subsidized car repairs for single parents and low-income individuals. The application process was detailed and required extensive documentation, but Margaret didn't let that deter her. She spent an entire weekend gathering the necessary paperwork, writing a heartfelt letter about her situation, and submitting the application. A week later, she received a call from the charity informing her that they would cover half the cost of the repair. While it didn't solve the entire problem, it was a lifeline that Margaret desperately needed. The experience taught Margaret an important lesson about humility and asking for help. For years, she had prided herself on her independence, often refusing assistance even when she needed it most. But now she realized that accepting help didn't make her weak. It made her human. The charity's support not only got her car back on the road, but also renewed her faith in the kindness of strangers. Margaret's setbacks didn't end with her car troubles. As her Etsy shop grew, so did the demands on her time and energy. Managing customer orders, sourcing materials, and shipping products became a full-time job in itself. There were days when she felt like she was juggling too many responsibilities. On one particularly stressful afternoon, Margaret received a message from an angry customer who claimed their order was delayed. The tone of the message was harsh, and it left Margaret feeling defeated. Instead of letting the negativity consume her, Margaret chose to approach the situation with professionalism and empathy. She apologized to the customer, explained the delay, and offered a small discount on their next purchase. The customer's response was unexpected. They appreciated her honesty and ended up leaving a positive review. This incident reinforced Margaret's belief in the importance of maintaining integrity, even in the face of criticism. However, the stress began to take a toll on her health. Margaret started experiencing frequent headaches and insomnia, likely caused by the constant pressure she was under. She realized that if she didn't prioritize her well-being, she wouldn't be able to sustain her efforts in the long run. Determined to find balance, Margaret began incorporating small self-care routines into her daily life. She started meditating for 10 minutes each morning, journaling her thoughts before bed, and taking short walks around her neighborhood. These simple practices helped her regain a sense of calm and clarity. During this time, Margaret also deepened her connection with her community. She joined a local women's support group, where she met others who were navigating similar challenges. The group became a sanctuary for Margaret, a place where she could share her struggles without fear of judgment. Listening to other women's stories and sharing her own was both cathartic and empowering. She realized that while her journey was uniquely hers, she wasn't alone in her fight to rebuild her life. One of the most transformative moments during this period came when Margaret was invited to speak at a financial literacy seminar organized by her community center. Initially, she was hesitant. "What do I have to offer?" she thought. But her children, especially Sarah, encouraged her to share her story. "Mom, you've come so far," Sarah said. "You don't realize how many people you could inspire." Margaret decided to take the plunge. Standing in front of a room full of strangers, she shared her journey with raw honesty. The mistakes she had made, the lessons she had learned, and the victories she had achieved. By the end of her talk, the room erupted in applause. Several attendees approached her afterward, thanking her for her vulnerability and courage. That day, Margaret realized the power of her story. It wasn't just about her. It was about showing others that it's possible to overcome even the most daunting challenges. Inspired by the seminar, Margaret decided to document her journey in a blog. She wrote about her experiences with debt, her strategies for saving money, and the emotional ups and downs of starting over. The blog gained traction quickly, attracting readers who resonated with her story. Margaret's honest and relatable writing struck a chord with her audience, and many of them reached out to share their own stories. The blog became more than just a platform for sharing advice. It became a community of support and encouragement. As Margaret's life continued to evolve, she began to see her setbacks not as failures, but as opportunities for growth. Each obstacle she faced taught her something valuable about herself and the world around her. She learned to embrace uncertainty, to find strength in vulnerability, and to celebrate every small victory. Margaret's journey was far from over, but she felt more equipped than ever to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Her children often marveled at her transformation. "Mom, you're like a phoenix rising from the ashes," Michael said during a family dinner. Margaret laughed, but deep down, she felt the truth in his words. She had been through the fire, and while she still bore the scars, she had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever. Margaret's determination to rise above her circumstances did not waver. But she knew surviving wasn't enough. She wanted to thrive. By this point, her life was no longer solely about repaying debt or scraping by. It had evolved into a mission to create something lasting, both for herself and her family. The financial lessons she had learned had reshaped her priorities, and she became deeply committed to achieving long-term stability and independence. Margaret wanted her children to see not just a mother who had survived hardship, but one who had conquered it with grace and fortitude. With her Etsy shop steadily gaining traction, Margaret realized it was time to think bigger. She began researching ways to scale her business without compromising quality. Hours were spent watching online tutorials, attending virtual workshops, and reading books on entrepreneurship. One of the most pivotal moments in her journey came when she stumbled across a course on e-commerce strategies. The course, though expensive, seemed tailored to her needs. After much deliberation, Margaret decided to invest in herself and signed up for the program. The course opened Margaret's eyes to a world of possibilities. She learned about effective marketing techniques, such as search engine optimization, social media advertising, and the importance of branding. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Margaret gave her Etsy shop a complete makeover. She hired a freelance graphic designer to create a professional logo, revamped her product descriptions to appeal to a broader audience, and began running targeted ads on platforms like Instagram and Pinterest. The results were almost immediate. Her sales doubled within the first month of implementing these changes. But Margaret's ambitions didn't stop there. She envisioned her handmade crafts not just as products, but as pieces of art that carried a story of resilience, creativity, and hope. To bring this vision to life, she started a blog section on her shop's website, where she shared the inspiration behind each item. Her candor and authenticity resonated with customers, many of whom became loyal supporters. Some even reached out with heartfelt messages, thanking Margaret for sharing her journey and inspiring them to pursue their own dreams. As her business flourished, Margaret faced new challenges, primarily the struggle to balance work and family life. Her children, now teenagers, required her attention in ways that were different but no less demanding. Michael, her youngest, was struggling with his math grades, while Sarah was preparing for college entrance exams. Margaret wanted to be there for her kids, but the demands of running a growing business often left her stretched thin. Realizing the importance of delegating, Margaret made the decision to hire her first employee, a part-time assistant named Chloe. Chloe, a young woman fresh out of college, shared Margaret's passion for handmade crafts and quickly proved to be an invaluable asset. With Chloe handling administrative tasks and customer inquiries, Margaret found herself with more time to focus on what mattered most, both in her business and her personal life. This newfound balance allowed Margaret to reconnect with her children on a deeper level. She made it a point to have regular family dinners, during which they would share their highs and lows from the day. These moments became sacred, a reminder of why she had fought so hard to rebuild her life. Margaret also made an effort to support her kids in their endeavors. She helped Michael with his math homework, using creative techniques she had picked up online, and guided Sarah through the daunting college application process. One of Margaret's proudest moments came when Sarah was accepted into her dream university. The acceptance letter arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon, and the family celebrated with a homemade dinner and a heartfelt toast. "To Sarah," Margaret said, raising her glass, "and to all the dreams that are now within reach." Sarah smiled through tears, hugging her mother tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom," she said. Margaret's journey of rebuilding her life also rekindled her sense of purpose. She realized that her story could serve as a beacon of hope for others who were struggling. With her children's encouragement, Margaret began giving talks at local community centers and women's shelters. She shared not just her struggles, but also the practical steps she had taken to overcome them. Her talks were met with standing ovations, and often left attendees moved to tears. These experiences inspired Margaret to write a book, a memoir detailing her journey from drowning in debt to reclaiming her life. Writing became a therapeutic process for Margaret, allowing her to reflect on how far she had come. She poured her heart into every chapter, hoping that her words would reach those who felt lost and hopeless. The book, titled Rising Above, A Story of Strength and Renewal, was self-published and received an overwhelming response. It wasn't a bestseller, but it touched the lives of those who read it, which was all Margaret had ever hoped for. With her business thriving, her family flourishing, and her story inspiring others, Margaret began to feel a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. She started to dream again, not just about what she could achieve, but about the legacy she wanted to leave behind. She envisioned a future where her children would carry forward the values of resilience, kindness, and perseverance that she had worked so hard to instill in them. In a poignant moment of reflection, Margaret wrote in her journal, "Life doesn't always go as planned, but it's in those unexpected detours that we often find our true path. I'm grateful for every challenge, every setback, because they've led me here, to a life I'm proud of and a future I'm excited to build." Margaret's journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt like the author of her own story. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Margaret's journey of personal and financial transformation had brought her to a place of stability, but her heart carried a deep desire to give back to the community that had once lifted her when she was at her lowest. She reflected on how her neighbors, friends, and even strangers had supported her, whether through kind words, small gestures, or moments of shared humanity. These acts of compassion had made all the difference. And now, Margaret felt it was her turn to become that source of hope for someone else. It all started with a simple idea. One evening, while organizing her inventory, Margaret noticed she had accumulated several items that didn't sell as quickly as others. Instead of letting these items gather dust, she decided to donate them to local shelters. These were high-quality handmade goods, scarves, blankets, and candles, that she hoped would bring warmth and comfort to those in need. Margaret made her first delivery on a chilly winter morning, personally handing out her creations and sharing stories with the recipients. The experience was deeply moving, and Margaret realized that her donations could be the start of something bigger. With her business growing steadily, she had the means to allocate a portion of her profits toward charitable initiatives. Margaret launched the Crafting for Kindness program, a campaign through which she donated a percentage of every sale to support local shelters, food banks, and organizations dedicated to helping families in crisis. Her customers embraced the initiative wholeheartedly, often leaving messages of support and gratitude. Margaret's program quickly gained recognition within the community. Local newspapers wrote articles about her efforts, highlighting the unique ways she combined entrepreneurship with philanthropy. This visibility led to partnerships with larger organizations, allowing Margaret to expand her reach. She began collaborating with women's shelters to host workshops where participants could learn crafting skills. These workshops became a safe space for women to connect, heal, and discover their own creative potential. One of the most inspiring moments in this new chapter of Margaret's life came when she met Laura, a young mother of two who had escaped an abusive relationship. Laura attended one of Margaret's workshops, shy and uncertain at first. Over time, however, she began to open up, sharing her own dreams of starting a small business to support her children. Margaret took Laura under her wing, mentoring her and sharing everything she had learned about running a successful online shop. Within a year, Laura launched her own Etsy store, selling handmade jewelry inspired by nature. Margaret was there to celebrate her first sale, and the joy in Laura's eyes reminded her of the first steps she had taken toward reclaiming her life. "You've given me more than advice," Laura told Margaret one day. "You've given me hope." As Margaret's impact grew, so did her aspirations. She dreamed of creating a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering women through entrepreneurship. This vision became a reality when she officially launched Second Chances, a nonprofit aimed at providing resources, training, and support to women seeking to rebuild their lives. The organization offered everything from financial literacy classes to mentorship programs, all designed to help participants gain the confidence and skills needed to succeed. Running Second Chances was no small task, but Margaret's passion and determination kept her going. She worked tirelessly, often sacrificing sleep to juggle the demands of her business and her nonprofit. Despite the challenges, Margaret found fulfillment in knowing that her efforts were making a tangible difference. She was no longer just surviving. She was creating ripples of change that extended far beyond her immediate circle. Margaret's children played a significant role in her journey of giving back. Sarah, now a college student, often volunteered at Second Chances during her breaks, helping with administrative tasks and organizing events. Michael, inspired by his mother's resilience and generosity, started a community service club at his high school. Together, they embodied the values of compassion and perseverance that Margaret had instilled in them. One particularly memorable event was the annual fundraiser gala for Second Chances. Held in a beautifully decorated community center, the event brought together donors, beneficiaries, and supporters. Margaret took the stage to share her story, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This organization was born from a place of struggle," she said, "but it has grown into a beacon of hope. Every woman here has the strength to overcome, to rebuild, and to thrive. I'm living proof of that, and so are all of you." The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears by Margaret's heartfelt speech. That night, the gala raised enough funds to support dozens of new programs, ensuring that more women would have access to the resources they needed to start anew. Margaret went home that evening with a full heart, knowing that her journey had come full circle. Despite her growing success, Margaret remained humble. She often reminded herself that life's hardships had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, gratitude, and the power of community. She continued to make time for small acts of kindness, whether it was baking cookies for a neighbor, mentoring a young entrepreneur, or simply lending a listening ear to someone in need. Margaret's story began as one of struggle, but it had transformed into a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Through her determination to rise above her circumstances, she had not only reclaimed her life, but also created opportunities for countless others to do the same. Her journey was far from over, but she embraced each new challenge with the same grit and grace that had carried her through her darkest days. In her journal, Margaret wrote, "When we give back, we don't just help others, we heal ourselves. Each act of kindness is a reminder that we're all connected, that our stories are interwoven. I am grateful for every moment, every lesson, and every person who has been part of this journey." Margaret's life was now a vibrant tapestry of resilience, compassion, and hope, a legacy that would continue to inspire for generations to come. As Margaret moved forward, she found herself reflecting on what it truly meant to be successful. For much of her life, she had associated success with financial stability, material possessions, and societal recognition. But her journey of overcoming hardship had taught her that real success was about living with purpose, finding joy in the present, and making a difference in the lives of others. It wasn't about the numbers in her bank account or the size of her home. It was about the legacy she was building through her actions, her kindness, and her unwavering resilience. Margaret began to share her philosophy with others, using her platform to challenge conventional definitions of success. On her blog and social media pages, she wrote about the value of emotional wealth, the ability to wake up each day with a sense of peace and fulfillment. Her words resonated deeply with her growing audience, many of whom were also searching for meaning in a world that often prioritized materialism. She started hosting community gatherings where people could come together to discuss their own experiences and aspirations. These events, held in her cozy workshop or local venues, became safe spaces for honest conversations about life's challenges and triumphs. Margaret would often open the sessions by sharing her story, emphasizing the lessons she had learned along the way. Success isn't about never failing, she would say. It's about how we rise after every fall, stronger and more determined than before. One of the most powerful outcomes of these gatherings was the sense of connection they fostered. Attendees left feeling inspired and supported, carrying with them new friendships and a renewed belief in their own potential. Margaret's ability to connect with people on such a personal level became one of her greatest strengths, solidifying her role as a mentor and leader in her community. Her redefined approach to success also transformed the way she ran her business. Margaret implemented policies that prioritized employee well-being, offering flexible schedules and mental health resources to her team. She believed that a healthy, happy workforce was essential to creating a thriving business. Her employees often spoke of how Margaret's compassion and understanding made them feel valued and motivated. This approach extended to her customers as well. Margaret began including handwritten thank you notes with every order, a small but heartfelt gesture that set her business apart. She also started sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses of her creative process, allowing her customers to see the care and dedication that went into each product. This transparency and authenticity deepened the bond between Margaret and her audience, fostering a loyal and supportive customer base. As her reputation grew, Margaret received invitations to speak at conferences and events focused on entrepreneurship and personal growth. Initially hesitant, she decided to step out of her comfort zone, recognizing that her story could inspire others to pursue their own dreams. Her speeches were always met with standing ovations, her words leaving a lasting impact on listeners from all walks of life. One particularly memorable event was a Women's Empowerment Summit where Margaret shared the stage with renowned leaders and changemakers. During her keynote address, she spoke about the importance of defining success on one's own terms. "Don't let the world tell you what success looks like," she told the audience. "You have the power to create your own definition, one that aligns with your values, your dreams, and your unique journey." Margaret's message struck a chord, sparking conversations that extended far beyond the event itself. Attendees shared her words on social media, spreading her message to an even wider audience. Margaret's inbox was soon flooded with messages of gratitude and stories from people who had been inspired to take control of their lives and pursue their passions. Despite her growing influence, Margaret remained grounded. She continued to prioritize the relationships that mattered most: her children, her close friends, and the community that had supported her through thick and thin. She made time for family dinners, long walks with her dog, and quiet evenings spent reading or crafting. These simple moments brought her the greatest joy, reminding her of how far she had come and the beauty of the life she had built. Margaret's journey was also a testament to the power of perseverance. There were still challenges to face, from navigating the complexities of running a nonprofit to balancing her personal and professional responsibilities. But she approached each obstacle with the same determination and grace that had carried her through her darkest days. Her children, Sarah and Michael, often marveled at their mother's resilience. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know," Sarah once told her during a late-night conversation. "You've shown us what it means to never give up, no matter how hard things get." Michael echoed his sister's sentiments, adding, "You've taught us that success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how you help others along the way." These words filled Margaret's heart with pride and gratitude. She knew that her journey wasn't just about reclaiming her own life. It was about creating a ripple effect that would inspire and empower others for generations to come. As she sat in her workshop one evening, putting the finishing touches on a new product, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. In her journal, Margaret wrote, "True success is measured not by what we have, but by who we become and the impact we make. I've learned that life's greatest rewards come from the challenges we face, the lessons we learn, and the love we give. This journey has been my greatest teacher, and I am forever grateful for the opportunity to grow, to give, and to thrive." Margaret's story, once defined by hardship, had become a celebration of resilience, purpose, and the boundless possibilities of the human spirit. Her legacy was one of hope and inspiration, a reminder that no matter how daunting the challenges we face, we all have the strength within us to rise, rebuild, and redefine success on our own terms. As Margaret's influence grew, she felt a deep responsibility to use her platform to empower others facing similar struggles. Her journey wasn't just about her own transformation. It was a beacon of hope for anyone feeling lost in the shadows of adversity. With every step she took, Margaret was determined to help others find their way back to the light, proving that no situation was too dire to overcome. She began by creating a mentorship program, inviting individuals from diverse backgrounds to learn the skills and mindset needed to rebuild their lives. Margaret personally guided her mentees, sharing the strategies that had helped her rise from the depths of despair. The program was tailored to address various challenges, from managing debt and rebuilding credit to nurturing self-confidence and identifying personal strengths. One of her mentees, Claire, was a single mother who had recently lost her job. She came to Margaret feeling defeated and unsure of how to support her children. Margaret took Claire under her wing, helping her develop a budget, update her resume, and apply for jobs that aligned with her skills. Within months, Claire not only secured stable employment, but also started her own side business selling handmade candles, a passion she had long neglected. Stories like Claire's became the heartbeat of Margaret's mission. She realized that her own experience of triumph over hardship could serve as a blueprint for others to follow. In addition to her mentorship program, Margaret began hosting workshops and webinars, accessible to people around the world. These sessions covered practical topics like financial literacy and time management, as well as emotional resilience and overcoming self-doubt. Margaret also collaborated with local organizations to provide resources for those in need. She partnered with food banks, financial counseling services, and small business associations to create a comprehensive support network. Her goal was to ensure that no one facing adversity would feel alone or without options. "When we lift each other up," Margaret often said, "we all rise together." One of her most impactful projects was a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing education or skills training. Margaret understood firsthand the challenges of juggling responsibilities while trying to improve one's circumstances. She wanted to give others the chance to achieve their dreams without the financial burden that often held them back. The scholarship fund quickly gained traction, with contributions pouring in from supporters who believed in Margaret's mission. Margaret's efforts extended beyond tangible resources. She became an advocate for mental health awareness, emphasizing the importance of seeking help during times of struggle. In interviews and public appearances, she spoke candidly about her own experiences with anxiety and self-doubt, breaking down stigmas and encouraging others to prioritize their well-being. Her vulnerability resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to take the first steps toward healing. Social media became a powerful tool for Margaret to connect with her audience and spread her message. She shared daily affirmations, practical tips, and heartfelt anecdotes from her own journey. Her posts were often accompanied by vibrant images of her handmade creations or snapshots of her community events. The comment sections became spaces of encouragement and support, with followers sharing their own stories and celebrating each other's progress. One viral post featured a simple, yet profound message. "It's okay to start over. It's okay to take your time. What matters is that you don't give up on yourself." The post was shared thousands of times, sparking conversations about resilience and self-worth across social media platforms. Margaret's words became a mantra for her followers, reminding them of their own strength and potential. Margaret's commitment to empowering others wasn't limited to adults. She launched initiatives aimed at inspiring the next generation to dream big and embrace their uniqueness. Through school visits and youth workshops, she encouraged children to explore their passions and believe in their ability to make a difference. She often shared stories of her own childhood struggles, emphasizing the importance of perseverance and creativity. During one memorable school visit, a young girl named Emma shyly approached Margaret after her presentation. "Do you really think I can be anything I want?" Emma asked, clutching a sketchbook filled with her drawings. Margaret knelt down, looked Emma in the eyes, and said, "Absolutely. You already have everything you need inside you. Just keep believing in yourself and never stop creating." Emma's face lit up with a smile, a moment that stayed with Margaret long after she left the school. Margaret's impact was further amplified through collaborations with influential figures in various fields. She appeared on podcasts, contributed to books on personal growth, and even co-hosted a documentary series highlighting stories of resilience from around the world. These opportunities allowed her to reach new audiences and reinforce her message that rebuilding one's life is possible, no matter how daunting the circumstances. Despite her busy schedule, Margaret always made time for personal connections. She often responded to messages from her followers, offering words of encouragement and practical advice. Her authenticity and genuine care for others set her apart in a world where many were focused solely on their own success. Margaret's greatest joy came from seeing the ripple effects of her efforts. Individuals and families reclaiming their lives and paying it forward to help others. As Margaret reflected on her journey, she was filled with gratitude for the people who had supported her along the way. She knew that her success was a collective effort, built on the strength of community and the kindness of strangers. In her journal, she wrote, "Empowering others isn't just about giving them tools. It's about showing them that they're capable of so much more than they realize. Together, we can create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive." Margaret's legacy was one of empowerment and hope. Her story, once defined by loss and struggle, had become a testament to the transformative power of resilience, compassion, and community. Through her unwavering commitment to lifting others up, Margaret proved that even the darkest moments can give rise to the brightest possibilities. Margaret understood that her journey was more than just a personal victory. It was the foundation for a lasting legacy. With the wisdom she had gained from overcoming adversity, she was determined to create something meaningful that would endure beyond her lifetime. She envisioned a future where her story and the work she was doing could inspire generations to come, reminding them that no matter their circumstances, they could rise, rebuild, and thrive. To bring this vision to life, Margaret began focusing on long-term projects that would continue to impact lives well into the future. One of her first initiatives was to establish a community center dedicated to support and empowerment. This center would offer workshops, counseling services, financial education, and creative spaces for people of all ages. It was designed to be a safe haven where individuals could find the resources and encouragement they needed to build better futures. Fundraising for the center became a community effort, with local businesses, volunteers, and supporters rallying around Margaret's cause. She organized charity events, art shows, and fundraising dinners, each one infused with the energy and spirit of hope that defined her mission. The process was challenging, requiring persistence and patience, but Margaret was undeterred. She believed deeply in the power of collective action and the strength of a united community. Alongside the community center project, Margaret started writing a memoir to share her full story, the highs, the lows, the lessons learned, and the triumphs achieved. She hoped the book would serve not only as a testament to her resilience, but also as a guide for others navigating similar struggles. Writing the memoir was a deeply cathartic experience, allowing Margaret to reflect on her past with both honesty and compassion. The memoir's publication marked another milestone in Margaret's journey. It received heartfelt praise for its authenticity and emotional depth, touching readers around the world. Many wrote to Margaret, thanking her for sharing such a vulnerable and inspiring story. The book became a source of comfort and motivation for those facing debt, loss, and life's uncertainties. Margaret also expanded her advocacy efforts by partnering with educational institutions and nonprofit organizations. She helped develop curricula focused on financial literacy and emotional resilience, ensuring that young people would have the tools to make informed decisions and face life's challenges with confidence. These partnerships allowed her message to reach a broader audience and create systemic change. Recognizing the importance of sustainability, Margaret worked to establish an endowment fund to support the ongoing operations of the community center and scholarship programs. This fund was designed to provide financial stability, allowing her initiatives to thrive even after she was no longer able to actively manage them. The thought of leaving behind a self-sustaining legacy gave Margaret a profound sense of peace. Her children, now grown, became integral partners in her mission. Sarah brought her business acumen and passion for social entrepreneurship, while Michael contributed his skills in technology and digital outreach. Together, they formed a dynamic team, blending their talents to amplify their mother's vision. Margaret took immense pride in watching them carry forward the values of resilience, compassion, and service she had instilled in them. Despite the growing demands of her work, Margaret made sure to maintain balance in her life. She continued to nurture her relationships with family and friends, cherishing moments of laughter and connection. She also made time for quiet reflection, often retreating to her garden where the simple beauty of nature reminded her of life's enduring cycles of growth and renewal. Margaret's story had come full circle, from a place of despair to one of empowerment and hope. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her setbacks into stepping stones, and her struggles into strength. Each day, she woke with renewed determination to build a world where others could find the same hope and opportunity she had discovered. In the quiet of her study, as she looked over letters from those she had helped and planned the next steps for her initiatives, Margaret felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her life was no longer defined by the debts and losses of the past, but by the impact she was making and the legacy she was creating. Her journey was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is potential for light, for growth, and for transformation. Margaret's story was proof that no matter how deeply life may challenge us, we all have the capacity to rise, rebuild, and leave behind a legacy of hope for those who follow. As Margaret stood at the threshold of a new chapter in her life, she was filled with an overwhelming sense of hope and possibility. The journey that had once seemed insurmountable, the crushing debt, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, had ultimately led her to a place of strength, purpose, and renewal. She realized that her story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The foundation she had built was strong, and the future held endless opportunities for growth, connection, and impact. Margaret embraced each day with a renewed spirit, eager to face new challenges and celebrate new victories. She had learned to view obstacles not as roadblocks, but as opportunities for learning and transformation. This mindset shift had been one of the most profound gifts of her journey, enabling her to approach life with resilience and optimism. Every setback was now a chance to adapt, evolve, and emerge stronger than before. Her community center thrived as a hub of activity, buzzing with workshops, support groups, and creative projects. It became a place where people found not only resources, but also a sense of belonging and empowerment. Margaret's vision of creating a supportive network had blossomed into a living, breathing reality that touched hundreds of lives every year. Seeing the smiles, hearing the stories of success, and witnessing the growth of her community brought Margaret immense joy and fulfillment. Margaret's memoir continued to inspire readers around the world, sparking conversations about mental health, financial literacy, and personal growth. She received invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and community events, where she shared her message with passion and authenticity. Each engagement was an opportunity to connect, uplift, and motivate others to reclaim their lives, just as she had done. Her family remained her anchor throughout it all. The bond she shared with her children and grandchildren was a source of endless strength and happiness. They celebrated milestones together, supported one another through challenges, and created cherished memories that enriched their lives. Margaret knew that the legacy she was building was not only about community impact, but also about the love and values she passed down to her family. Margaret also found time to pursue personal passions that had long been set aside. She rekindled her love for painting, spending peaceful afternoons capturing the beauty of nature on canvas. She traveled to places she had dreamed of visiting, exploring new cultures and perspectives that broadened her horizons. These experiences nourished her soul and reminded her that life's richness comes from embracing both purpose and joy. As she looked to the future, Margaret remained committed to continuous growth and learning. She enrolled in courses, attended workshops, and stayed connected with mentors and peers who inspired her. This dedication to lifelong learning ensured that she remained adaptable and innovative, ready to meet the evolving needs of her community and herself. Margaret's story became a testament to the power of resilience, community, and hope. It illustrated that even when life feels overwhelming, there is always a path forward, one that leads to healing, empowerment, and new beginnings. Her journey encouraged others to believe in their own strength, and to never lose sight of the possibilities that await beyond hardship. In the quiet moments of reflection, Margaret often thought about the countless people who had touched her life along the way, friends, mentors, strangers, and those she had helped. Each connection was a thread in the tapestry of her life, woven together with compassion and kindness. She felt deeply grateful for the collective spirit that had supported her rise and fueled her ongoing mission. Margaret's legacy was now firmly rooted in the hearts and minds of those she had inspired. It was a living legacy, growing stronger with every life transformed and every dream realized. She knew that the seeds she had planted would continue to blossom for generations, carrying forward a message of hope and resilience that could never be extinguished. As the sun rose on each new day, Margaret greeted it with gratitude and determination. She was a living example that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes, bringing with it the promise of endless possibilities and the power to create a brighter future. If Margaret's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, no matter how tough life gets, there's always a way forward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.